Now let's talk about first pharyngeal arch. Before going into detail, we have to recap a thing that each pharyngeal arch consists of a core of mesenchymal tissue. So each pharyngeal arch can have a core of mesenchymal tissue. Now, the bones that will develop from the pharyngeal arches will develop from that mesenchymal tissue. And we know that ossification inside mesenchymal tissue is known as membranous ossification. So, the bones that are developed from first pharyngeal arch is obviously developing from its mesenchymal tissue, mesenchymal core. So, this bone formation or ossification, all this bone formation is by membranous ossification. So, the bones that are developing from first arch, maxilla, zygomatic bone, temporal bone, so some part of temporal bone, and mandible, is by membranous ossification. Now, let's go into detail from where these bones have developed. First pharyngeal arch has two parts. Here you can see it has a maxillary process. This whole thing is the first pharyngeal arch. It has a maxillary process. It has a mandibular arch, and it has a macal cartilage. Now this portion of the macal cartilage will disappear eventually, and this portion will remain. And maxillary process will form this bone, maxilla, some part of temporal bone, and also zygomatic bone. The mandibular arch around this macal cartilage, suppose this is the macal cartilage, around this mandibular arch is present. So around this macal cartilage it will form mandible, and this portion of macal cartilage that will remain will form incus and malleus. Now the mesenchymal tissue that is present in the pharyngeal arches will give rise to, we have two components. One is neural crystals, another is mesodermal component. Neural crystals is giving rise to these bones. The mesodermal component will form muscles. The musculature of the first pharyngeal arch include muscle of mastication. So, what from this muscle of mastication is developing? From the mesenchymal core of first pharyngeal arch, and from which layer, or we have which germ layer? It is mesodermal in origin. Why mesodermal? Because muscles that are developing from the pharyngeal arches is developing from the mesodermal component. Now, what are these muscles of mastication? These muscles of mastication is temporalis, masseter, and pterygoid. And also it gives rise to anterior belly of digastric, mylohyoid, tensor tympani, and tensor palatini. Now we have seen here that each pharyngeal arch is characterized by its own muscular component. The muscular component of each arch have their own cranial nerve. So what is the cranial nerve for first pharyngeal arch? The cranial nerve for first pharyngeal arch is mandibular branch of trigeminal nerve. Remember that muscle of the arches do not always attach to the bony or cartilaginous component that are derived from the same arch. But the origin of these muscles can always be traced because their nerve supply is derived from the arch of origin. So, we can trace from where the muscle has derived by seeing its nerve supply, not by seeing its bony attachment or cartilaginous attachment.